Hello and welcome back to another X-Plane 12 video. In this video we're going to be doing another XP career mission. I've got one all lined up and we're going to be doing it in this wonderful Payware DHC-2 Beaver. I reinstalled all of my Payware aircraft and I realised that this was actually falling under the same check ride license that we did in a couple of videos ago. Let's take a look inside. So this Beaver here has a number of benefits over the Super Cub that we were flying, but it still has the old school feel that the RV10 was kind of missing. I did a couple of flights in that RV10 and it kind of felt a bit too modern for me. So I've gone back to a little bit more old school. However, we do have some creature comforts in this, which is going to make longer missions much nicer for us. So chief among which we have our GNS 430 here, so we're actually going to be able to do some proper electronic navigation. We also have an autopilot as well, so that's going to give us a hand, especially on the mission that I have planned today. For today's mission we are going to be doing a sightseeing tour. Now this is going to take us over to the Embassy of Lebanon, and then just generically somewhere in London, up to Woodcroft Castle, and then over to Ponai Cafnau. No idea if I'm saying that correctly, but that sounds about right to me. One of the other big advantages of this Beaver is that we have a lot more seats back here. So if we spin around, we can see we've got 7 passenger seats that we can take, so we can load up a bunch of people on this nice little sightseeing tour and actually earn, hopefully, a decent bit of money. So each one of these passengers is going to be paying us £2,750 near enough. So let's load everybody on. And there we go, we are full, we have 7 seats full. We've still got some remaining payload, so I'm actually going to bump up the fuel. This is expected to be about a 315 nautical mile journey, so we're going to make sure we've got lots of extra fuel, and we're really going to top this up to make sure we've got some spare capacity as well. That should be fine. Let's go for about 400 miles, 3 hours of endurance. That should be fine for this flight. So with our fuel all loaded, we can also see that our centre of gravity is all looking fine as well. We'll check this again after the people have been loaded, because I think this should also update as well. But we'll just make sure that is good to go. So in XP Korea, let's go to our main window. We can see we have our passengers. We'll click Fly Now. And we see for this mission we should be earning nearly £16,000. Now I've got a lot more other generic updates that I'm going to do, but this is going to be a very long flight, so I shall do those in the air. My first priority is getting everybody up and on our way over to London, but I'm going to accept this job. Now I have planned what I believe to be a pretty good route, so let's take a look at that. So over here at SimBrief, we can see that I've got everything set up. So we're departing and arriving at the same airport. It's going to be Oaksey. And then for our route, we are going to be flying across to London. I've not cared about any airspace or anything like that for this mission. We're going to be flying over to Victor Papa 155. So the Lebanese embassy is in Holland Park in London, so right around here. So we're going to first navigate to Victor Papa 155 and then up to Holby, and that should then cover us for that sightseeing. And then afterwards we are heading up to this airport up here, so Connington. We actually need to go a bit further north than Connington to be able to get to the castle that people want to go and take a look at. And then after looking at the castle, we are going to head down to South Wales here to take a look at something just north of Merthyr Tydfil. And then we are heading back here. So let's get these passengers loaded and then we can check our weight and balance again and see how things are looking. So we should have a lovely vehicle arrive. We can hear the passengers getting in. the XP Career dev has done a lot of work updating this. Again, I'll update that a bit more in the air. There we are, our passengers are loaded, so let's take a look at our weight here. We are pretty much out of our CG, but only just, so a little bit tail heavy, which is not very good at all, but I think we should be fine. If we burn out of the rear tank, then that should be acceptable for us. Okay, let's get the engine running and let's get the navigation all plumbed into the computer, and then we shall get underway. So in the Beaver here we have our master switch, which we're going to turn on. You can see our fuel levels are looking good. We're going to burn out of that rear tank first, hopefully move that CG a bit further forwards. We're going to get our beacon on as we will be starting our engine fairly shortly. Increase our mixture to full, same with our prop, we'll go full fine. We have the rear tank selected, so that's all good. We'll crack the throttle just a little bit. And then with this, we need to manually pump up some fuel pressure. So this gauge down here, it is a little bit dark, but what I'm going to do is we have our little wobble pump. So I'm going to go ahead and pump that, and we can see that the fuel pressure is increasing. We're going to get that into our little green area, like so. And then before it depressurizes, we are going to get both mags to on, and let's start this engine. There we go, so with the engine running, we'll go ahead and turn on the alternator, turn on the cabin light for what it's going to do, but not much. And then we shall go ahead and turn on our avionics, which is this switch up here on the dash. So we'll give these guys a second to warm up. I will get this programmed for our navigation route, and then I'll bring you guys back. Alright then, so everything has been programmed in. You can see we're heading across to Victor Papa 155, then Holby, then Connington, over to Tisdoo, and then back here to Oaksey with an accumulative distance of 303 nautical miles. So very good. Our next bearing as soon as we take off is going to be 096, but we can worry about that in the air. That's no problem at all. The engine is slowly warming up. We're getting to the point where we're ready for takeoff. Let's have a look at our little map here. We'll have a look at the weather conditions here over at Oaksey and check out what the active runway is. So our weather conditions, they're looking fine, visibly more than 10 miles. We've got a fair bit of cloud up today, but it's starting at around 3,700, and then we are going to be departing on runway 22 once again. So down to the left and then take off runway 22. We can also see QNH here is 1018, and this is where I'll introduce one of the little things that I've added to the sim in this short little break that I've had. I've got myself the XP remote app on a little Android tablet that's sitting next to my monitor. So what I'm able to do is over here in the comms section we can see all of the radios, which we're not going to be using today, but what we can set is our barometer. So I'm going to select the barometer and then we're going to do 1018 and set that, and that will then synchronize into X-Plane. So everything is good to go. I can also control the autopilot from here, and I'm going to be taking advantage of that, definitely. So with all that out of the way, let's get ourselves down to runway 22 and ready for takeoff. I'm going to switch on our nav lights, our strobes, and also our landing light at this point. It doesn't have a dedicated taxi light, so I'll just use the landing light in its place. Let's release the parking brake. I'll put the yoke back up on the screen, get rid of this for the time being, and let's head out to runway 22. Right, so here we are then, we are ready to go. I'm going to get our flaps down to the takeoff position, like so. We already have our landing light on, so that's ready. I'm actually going to pre-configure the autopilot. So over on the tablet, I'm going to turn on the flight director. This aircraft doesn't actually have a flight director, but this will enable the buttons, and then when I'm ready, I can just tap AP, and then everything will be live. So we're going to use the navigation. So we're going to set to nav mode, and then for the altitude selection, we're going to do altitude select, and then I'm going to give us an altitude here. Let's go initially up to 2,500, and then we're going to do a vertical speed on that of 500 feet per minute. We can then adjust that when we get airborne. Everything is good. All my passengers are ready to go. There's 500 feet, so I'm going to start our turn out to the right here to head towards London. I'm also going to slowly get some flaps away, let the airspeed increase as we go. I think the 500 feet per minute climb might have been a little bit ambitious, given the amount of weight that we've got on board currently. So I'm very slowly getting our flaps taken out back to our climb setting. There we go, so we are in climb. I'm going to now engage the autopilot, and let's decrease the vertical speed. We'll do 300 feet per minute, and autopilot is now on. Fantastic. So I'm going to monitor this climb out, and then when we're up at some sort of cruise, I'll bring you back and we'll talk about some changes that I've made. Here we are then, stabilised in our climb, and one thing I did just suddenly think about to hopefully correct our CG problem is if we take a look down here at our fuel tanks, we can see that there is actually a little bit of space left in our front fuel tank, not a huge amount but a little bit. And so what we can do is we can actually transfer some fuel from our wingtip tanks down to that front fuel tank, and that should hopefully bring that fuel further forwards and therefore give us a bit better weight distribution. So up here, what I can do is set this to both, and that will then go ahead and drain that fuel down into the front tank. So that's going to keep going. We do need to be very careful not to overfill this tank, as it will just start spilling out of the aircraft. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that to fill up just a smidge, and I'm not going to do too much. We weren't that far out on our CG, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue at all, and things seem to be flying okay as it is. Now, one other thing we can do in this beaver is if we look up here to our top right, we can see this wheel. Now, this wheel is for our rudder trim. So, something we couldn't do in the Super Cub, and I was manually having to hold our trim, is keep ourselves coordinated a bit easier. So we can see the ball here is currently off to the right, so I need to trim to the right. I've got a button on my joystick here to do this, so as I press that trim button, we can see that that will slowly bring us into a bit more of a coordinated flight. Now, every time we adjust the engine RPM, we will need to adjust this, but for long climbs and long cruises, we get that set and everything's looking good. Fantastic. So we are on our way over to the Lebanese embassy. Currently in the climb, we've got 35 minutes to go, 62 miles. As we level out and stop our climb though, that will improve. I'm going to keep the climb going. I don't really want to stop here at 2,500. Things are looking pretty good. There is some blue sky up there, so we will keep climbing through. I'll probably get us up to about 5,000 and then drop back down for the sightseeing part of the tour. There we are, we just reached our cruising altitude of 5,000. Our speed is increasing, so very good. Let's get ourselves in a cruise. So I'm going to get our flaps away and into our cruise setting. That will also help us speed up much better as well. We're also going to reduce our RPM on our propeller, make the noise a bit more tolerable and give us a bit more torque. I don't want to increase the manifold pressure too much. I'm going to reduce the throttle ever so slightly so that we don't run into that red line on our manifold pressure. And let's bring that prop right back to 2,000 RPM. There we go. We'll drop our manifold pressure down to, let's do 33. Cool, that looks pretty good there. And we'll adjust that speed, see how we get on as things stabilise out a little bit. So hopefully you've seen some of the improvements that I've made already. I've added a mod that adjusts some of the lighting, so you can see we've got much better lighting through the clouds and on the ground, and things should change in the cockpit. Sometimes it does appear a bit too dark in the cockpit, so I may brighten things up in editing slightly, but overall everything's looking very, very nice and it's a vast improvement. I've also added a bunch of objects on the ground, so a bunch more trees and buildings, much more realistic representation of what's happening down on the ground. And I've also managed to download a bunch of ortho scenery, so the ground terrain should be of much higher detail. It does seem like we're getting ourselves into a little cloud layer here as we're talking, so I may climb up above it. We've still got nearly 40 miles to go, 20 minutes, so I might bump us up to maybe 6,000 or 7,000 feet, try and get ourselves up and above these clouds. So I think it's about time we start to descend. If we take a look at the map here, as we can't see outside, if we zoom down we can see Echo Golf Lima Lima. This is Heathrow Airport. We're just approaching that. We're really not far out. We're only 15 miles from our first waypoint, so it's about time we descended. So on my little tablet I'm going to do altitude select, and then I'm going to select an altitude down here. Let's do 2,500, and then we shall VS down at, let's go for 400 feet per minute, and I'll just monitor on the speed, make sure we're not going too quickly. However, there is one more thing we need to do, and that is take a look at our fuel situation. We're down to about 4 gallons of fuel left in that rear tank. We've got loads in the front and the middle, so I'm going to swap over to start draining out of the middle tank. like so. That is now selected on the centre tank. Everything's looking good, up and running. We are descending, and hopefully now we should not make an embarrassing mistake. I'm hoping we break out these clouds with enough time to take a good look at Heathrow as we go past, and then we should see the sights of London appear as we head in towards Holland Park. So I've continued the descent down to 1,500. We've just crossed Victor Papa 155. Now we're heading up to Holby. So we just made our turn, and I can see the little marker out there. In fact, not the best day to be sightseeing, but I suppose there could be a lot worse. So down here we can see that lovely building there is apparently the Embassy of Lebanon. This new scenery really is blowing me away. I'm really enjoying looking at all this new scenery. It really looks great. And they are taking some photographs behind me there, so definitely seems like they are enjoying the view of the embassy there. I'm going to increase that propeller RPM just to make sure we don't slow ourselves down too much. They're getting a good view of that embassy just down there on the park. Good. Alright, let's take a look at the XP tablet and see what it says we need to do now. See if it's updated. It wants me to maintain 1,000 AGL, in fact. So I'm going to need to, let's come off autopilot, disconnect that, and we're going to descend. I did not realise we needed to be at 1,000 feet AGL. So I'll start a left turn, keep the turn coming down, and now it's telling me that I need to get closer to it again. So yeah, we'll keep that left turn going, we'll circle and bring ourselves down to 1,000 AGL. There's a lovely train station there. Not sure which one that's going to be here. I don't think it's Paddington. Might be. But there's the embassy. There we go. We need to orbit and get this to 100%. This is the first sightseeing mission that I've done, so this is all a little bit new to me. Let's bump up the power and keep us around 1,000 AGL. These guys take some pictures. The guys on the right hand side aren't going to be getting very good pictures, but hopefully the ones on the left can share. I'm just going to stay nice and close, orbiting around it. There's our marker, looking good. And there we are. So that is that one completed. Let's make sure we're not falling out of the sky. We're looking good. Now we need to head over to Woodcroft Castle, which is up near Peterborough. So let's set that up in our navigation down here. We're going to go to Holby first. I think that's fine. We can just continue on with that plan. So I'm going to go ahead and on the altitude selector on the autopilot, we're going to set this to just 2,000, give them a nice view of London as we leave. We're going to VS up at 300 a minute, and let's engage that autopilot. That's going to take us over to Holby first, and then onwards towards Woodcroft Castle. Well, there we go, that was beautiful. Lovely views of Holland Park, Hyde Park. There, I believe one of the stations there was Paddington as well, so yeah, very nice. Let's get ourselves back into a cruise configuration then. We're going to head back up to 5,000 or 6,000 feet. We have a distance of 53 miles to go, and then we'll need to head out a little bit longer because this mark isn't exactly on the castle, but we'll continue on. We'll find the castle, let everybody take some pictures, and then head across to South Wales. So in our tablet I'm going to altitude select. We are going to head up to, let's do 5,000 initially. There we go, there's 5,000 set, and then we're going to set our vertical speed to be, let's do 300 feet per minute, and up we go into our climb. So we are very nearly at our next waypoint, but one thing I did just notice is that we are very, very low in fuel in our middle tank. So just before we run out, what we're going to do is swap over to using our front tank. There we are. So we have pretty much empty rear, a very empty middle tank, and now we're running out of the front. And we'll be able to top that front tank back up with our wing tanks when that gets a little bit low. So this waypoint here, this Echo Golf Sierra Foxtrot, is we're 10 miles from it, and I believe it's about 10 miles away from the actual point that we're going towards. So in a few minutes here I'm going to start descending down, and then we'll get ready to let our passengers take some pictures of this lovely castle. So we are just approaching Conington here. We've got 2.5 miles to go. Now obviously if we stay on our navigation, what's going to happen is our computer here will move on to Tisdu and start heading us off to South Wales, but we don't want to head over to South Wales just yet. We still need to go and have a look at Woodford Castle first. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take this heading of 354. We are going to make sure that our heading bug is synchronized with that, and over on the tablet I'm going to swap from nav mode and we are going to go into heading mode. Now what's going to happen is the computer, the GNS 430 here, that will transfer across. It will tell us to do our left turn, but we're going to ignore that and continue on. And then as soon as we are ready, we're finished with our sightseeing, I'll just use the direct function to reprogram a direct route from where we end up down to Tisdu, and then we shall fly that route instead of what it's doing here. It should be not too far away now, so I'll probably start a descent initially down to 2,000, then when we get some visual on it we'll come down to our 1,000 so that people can take lovely, lovely pictures. So we're in the descent and just checking the XP Career tablet here. It's showing us that actually we want a heading of 341 to head directly there, and the chances are we would have got close enough with this to see it and then correct from there, but we are a little ways off our 340 heading now. So what we'll do is just down here on the heading bug we'll go ahead and change ourselves over so that we're heading sort of more towards that 340 heading. So in actual fact we are just about to overfly the castle. I've actually managed to come in much higher than I had anticipated. So what I'll do, I'm going to disengage the autopilot and we're going to hand fly this. Let's reduce some of our throttle. It's actually just under our left nose here, so there we go. We can just see the little red marker that they've handily put out for us today. So we're going to just orbit this location in a descending orbit down to our 1000 AGL, and then when we get around there, people should start taking pictures, and then we can move on to South Wales afterwards. Here we are then, so the percentage is ticking up, so I'm just going to keep that castle. Doesn't look much like a castle in in the simulator here, however I'm sure it does look more impressive in real life. So I'm going to keep us flying here around our 1000 feet, which I've just climbed up above too high, so we'll descend back down. There we go, we shall maintain roughly this altitude and let them keep taking pictures. There we are, so that is the picture taking complete. That was not exactly the smoothest of photo taking experiences, I'm sure, for our passengers in the back there. But let's go ahead, increase our power back up again. We're going to get our wings level and we're going to start climbing. We've got 125 miles to head out to South Wales. Down on my navigation here, I'm going to say direct, and it's going to take me direct to Tydfil, so I shall activate that. There we go, looking good. I shall swap my autopilot over to nav mode again. Now we're going to go ahead and do altitude select up to, let's do 6,000. We've got quite a distance to go. I may continue increasing if we get clouds or whatever. Let's VS that up at, again, 300 feet per minute, and then autopilot engage. Right then, here we are. That cruise has taken a very long time. I started out climbing up to about 8,000 feet and then very quickly realised that I wasn't going very fast. I went up there to try and save some fuel, but the headwind was just far too strong. So I descended down, and now as we're moving our way into Wales, the headwind is only getting stronger. So if we take a look at our fuel situation here, open up the panel, we can see that our wingtip tanks are now completely empty, along with our mid and rear tank, and then we've got just less than 20 gallons in our front tank. We're only a few minutes away now from Tydfil here, so 4 minutes from there, and then the point that we need to photograph isn't actually too much further beyond. We take a look, we've then got a nearly 60-mile journey back to Oaksey Park. However, taking a look at the wind here, we see all the little arrows. There is at least a component of the wind that will be carrying us back towards our destination, so hopefully we should be absolutely fine on fuel. I'm going to climb up fairly high on that return journey, as if we do take another look at this wind and we set the wind up to, let's say, 9,000, we can see that it is even stronger. So I'm probably going to climb back up to 8,000 again, and then we'll make that hopefully fairly efficient journey back. It's not the best, but it's at least better than what we have been fighting into on my track here. So we're approaching our photography point. Let's get a bit closer. So out in the distance there I can see our little marker. Let's go ahead and bring up the XP tablet so we can see when we start actually being able to orbit that area. We're a little bit off on the heading, but there's no reason to head directly to it. We can just orbit around and it should be absolutely fine. Disconnected the autopilot, so that's gonna and fly this around. Probably a little bit high here. I don't know what the ground elevation is, but we look a bit higher than 1,000, so I'm gonna slowly descend us down, just so that we can minimise the amount of time we need to spend orbiting here, and just keep an eye on that fuel level. There we are, so we are orbiting straight away, we are at a good altitude, so let's just try and maintain this. Get that left turn going, start that orbit. There is the place that we're looking at. We're too close now, apparently. That's a bit of a shame. Okay, let's fly further out. So yeah, I turned in a little bit too early. There we go. We're now successfully orbiting once again. We can see that down in the tablet there in the very bottom left of the screen. Get this to 100%. There we are, tour complete. Return to Oaksey Park. I will do that. Okay, the navigation has already jumped across, it looks like. Let's just say direct to Oaksey Park. So I'm going to go to my flight plan. Oaksey Park, direct, enter. There we go. Right then, so let's get everything stabilised. So we are heading back to Oaksey Park. We're going to have a nice tailwind, so what we're going to do is set our altitude nice and high. We're going to come all the way up probably to, let's say 7,000 for this, and then let's start heading up. We've got a decent airspeed, so let's increase our rate of climb. We'll try 500 feet per minute and we'll see where we go from there. Right then, here we are just crossing the Severn estuary. We've got the bridge down there and then the Prince of Wales Bridge down here, so the old bridge, and then the new bridge. I've been trying to do some pretty good fuel conservation, so we are pulled way back. We're still pretty low on fuel though, so we are now approaching the point where we need to start descending, so we should be absolutely fine. We've got just over 20 miles to go. So over on the tablet I'm going to select an altitude. We'll come down to, let's say 1,000. and then we're going to VS that down at 600 feet per minute. I can then ease even further back on the throttle, save some more fuel, get a nice free journey heading down. I'm also going to put some carb heat in, as I suspect on our descent here things in the engine bay are going to get a little bit chilly. Here we are then, levelling off at our 1,000 feet. We're going to need to increase the power back again. We're going to need to get some more mixture and some more prop in. We can see the lights of Kemble out in the distance, so we know we're getting pretty close. And if we take a look down at our navigation, we're just about 5 miles away. So let's keep everything going. Note to self for future is definitely take more fuel than you're going to need. Did not quite expect such a strong headwind on that really long leg over to South Wales. And that's caused this quite low fuel situation. So we should be able to see Oaksey out the front here pretty soon. Okay, make a left turn, we'll come around, set ourselves up and come into runway 22. I'm going to turn off the autopilot and we're going to fly ourselves in. I'm going to bring the power down, we're going to slow the plane down and start getting our flaps in. Oaksey Park down there, looking good. So let's really bring that power back. We're going to get our mixture and our prop up. Make sure our landing light is turned on. Try and maintain this speed, looking good. Let's start to get some flaps in as we slow down. And then let's go for a right turn to turn onto Oaksey. Add some power here, stop us from descending. There we go, we overshot the runway. I'm going to ease back. Let's get the rest of our flaps out. We've got a fairly long runway here, so it's nothing that we can't correct for. Trying to arrest that rate of descent. Probably shouldn't be at lamppost levels. And then tapping on the brakes. Especially as we get slow, you don't want to hold the brakes because you'll just end up nosediving. Alright, there we go. So let's bring up XP Korea and see where it wants us to park. Grass parking 6. I did think the landing was rather firm, and yeah, XP Korea also believes the same. So let's have a turn around here and try and find our parking spot. Get ourselves off the runway. Well, there we are. So we are parked up. Let's set our parking brake like so. And we can go ahead and turn off some lights that we don't need, turn off the pitot heat. Let's keep that engine running, we don't want it to die on us. Don't need our strobes or our nav light anymore, we've still got the beacon on, we've still got the alternator on for now. We can shut down the engine. There we are, very good. Let's check out this. We can unload our passengers. I'm sure they're itching to get off. It's been quite a long flight. So we'll get them deplaned. While they're doing that, let's get the alternator off. Let's get our flaps into the up position. Turn our beacon off now as well. And they get into their car. Very good. So that is job complete, and we made a wonderful profit there of £15,700. So that will go quite a long way to getting us our first plane to own. Now I'm a little bit torn as to which plane to go for. I really do like flying this Beaver, but the RV10, a bit more modern. It's got the G1000, so it's a bit nicer in terms of the navigation. But I really do like this old stuff, so I think I'm going to save up and head more towards this Beaver here. But that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you very much for watching. It's probably a long one, so if you've reached it this far, really thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.